There is a plant growing in the crack of your driveway right now that carries more of a certain omega-3 than any leafy green ever measured. You've walked past it 100 times. You've probably pulled it up with your bare hands and thrown it in a bucket because every gardening article you have ever read told you it was a weed. And while you were throwing it away, you were paying good money for the same nutrient in a soft gel capsule from a bottle on a shelf. Picture it, low to the ground, spreading flat in a mat that never stands taller than your ankle. Smooth stems, thick and a little swollen, the way a succulent is swollen, tinged red or maroon where the sun hits them. Small, rounded leaves, glossy, shaped like little green paddles, clustered at the tips. If you catch it in summer, tiny yellow flowers with 5 petals, and they only open in the morning sun, so most people never even see them. Snap a stem and the sap runs clear and watery. You know this plant. You have knelt over it with a trowel and cursed it. It comes up in the vegetable bed, in the sidewalk seams, in the poor compacted dirt along the fence line where nothing else bothers to grow. It shows up across nearly the entire country, everywhere except the far northern edge. And here is the part nobody tells you while you are yanking it out. Across the Mediterranean, across Mexico, across the Middle East and China, people do not weed this plant. They eat it. They sell it in the market. They have eaten it for 2,000 years. In this country, we spray it. This is Purslane, Portulaca oleracea. In Mexico, they call it verdolagas. In Greece, glistrida. In Turkey, semizotu. In Iran, korfe. In China, machi sian, the horse-tooth vegetable. 9 different names in 9 different kitchens, and in American English, it mostly answers to one word: weed. Here is the paradox, stated flat, because it is the reason for this entire video. Purslane is the richest leafy green source of plant omega-3 ever measured, somewhere around 300 to 400 milligrams of the fatty acid called alpha-linolenic acid in every 100 grams of fresh leaves. A team led by the researcher Artemis Simopoulos published that in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition in 1992. The University of Florida's own extension service calls it the reigning champion of vitamins A and E among vegetables, a single 100-gram serving covering most of a day's vitamin requirement. One of the most nutrient-dense green things you can put in your mouth. And it is growing, uncounted and unwanted, in the cracks of the pavement outside your door. Nobody harvests a single leaf of it. And it is not only the omega-3. Look at what the composition tables put in 100 grams of the raw leaf. Around 490 milligrams of potassium, close to 70 milligrams of magnesium, 21 milligrams of vitamin C, more vitamin A than you will find in most greens on the shelf, and, as I said, the highest vitamin E of any vegetable that has been measured. All of that for roughly 20 calories, because the leaf is more than 90% water. Set it beside spinach, the green we actually do sell, and Purslane carries something like 4 to 5 times the omega-3, leaf for leaf. That is a genuinely dense little package, and it is the documented basis for the claim in the title, not a slogan somebody made up. A few more marks to know it by, because being certain is the whole game. It is a summer annual. It comes up only once the soil is properly warm, runs hard through the hot months, and the first real frost kills it outright, which is why you never meet it in winter. In high summer, it throws those little yellow flowers, and after them a seed capsule that pops open around its middle like a tiny lidded pot, spilling out fine black seed. Fat, succulent stem, paddle leaves at the tips, yellow flowers in the morning, a little seed pot that lifts its lid. That is your plant. Before you go pick any, one thing out there can hurt you, and it grows in the exact same driveway crack. So learn it now. There is a lookalike called spurge, prostrate spurge, that spreads in the same flat mat with the same reddish stems in the same poor ground. From standing height, they can fool you. Here is the one test that never fails, and it takes a second. Pinch or snap a stem. Purslane bleeds clear, watery sap. Spurge bleeds a milky white sap, and that milk is an irritant to your skin, your eyes, and your gut. Clear sap, keep it. Milky sap, drop it and wash your hands. Purslane is also fat and smooth and succulent in the stem, where spurge is thin and often hairy. Clear and juicy, or milky and wiry. That is the whole safety check, and it is not optional. So who actually eats it? Start in Mexico, where it is verdelegas, counted among the quelites, the wild edible greens, and it goes into a pot with pork and green tomatillo salsa in a dish people have made on a Sunday for generations. Go to Crete, where it is glistrita, thrown raw into salads, simmered into stews, so ordinary that it is fed to the laying hens as well, and the eggs carry that same fat forward into the yolk. Turkey eats it as semizotu, cooked down and folded into yogurt. Across the Levant in Egypt, it is bakla, chopped raw into fattoush or stewed soft with garlic. In China, it is stir-fried fresh and dried and hung for winter. In France, it is porpier, a proper salad leaf in the old kitchen gardens. In India, it goes into the pot as a leafy vegetable under a dozen regional names. And in the dry interior of Australia, Aboriginal peoples gathered its seed for thousands of years, seed that runs roughly a fifth protein and a sixth fat by weight. A single plant makes so many seeds that they could heap it, dry it, thresh it, and grind the seed into flour for cakes. The botanist Joseph Maiden wrote the method down in 1889. The World Health Organization has listed purslane among the most widely used medicinal plants on Earth, and a review published in 2017 tracked its traditional use across some 30 different countries. Sit with that for a second. This is not a fringe plant. It is one of the most commonly eaten wild greens there is, and the country spraying it out of the pavement is closer to the exception than the rule. This is also not a modern health food discovery. It is a very old food that we, specifically, forgot. Dioscorides, the Greek physician writing in the 1st century, listed purslane in his great catalog of medicines under the name andrachne, and recorded that people use the leaves for headache and for the stomach, and the juice to cool the eyes. Pliny the Elder, in that same century, wrote up remedy after remedy from it, and recorded, in a detail that tells you how much they valued the plant, that people wore it as an amulet to drive off evil. In China, the herb was named ma qi xian, and in that tradition, it was given for dysentery and for skin sores, and it carried the folk title, vegetable for long life. Now hear what I am doing there. I am telling you what old documents record people doing. I am not telling you it worked. And you should notice that I am keeping those two things apart, because most of the internet will not. There is a reason a modern researcher went looking at this weed in the first place, and it is one of the famous puzzles in nutrition. In the great 7-country study that ran after the Second World War, the people of Crete had the lowest rate of death from heart disease of anyone measured, and this on a diet heavy in fat. When their blood was analyzed, it carried around 3 times the omega-3 of, say, the Dutch. And part of what they were eating, day in and day out, was wild purslane, straight from the field edges and the roadsides. Now hold the qualifier because it matters. That is an association, not a proven cause. Cretans did 100 things differently, from the olive oil to the walking to the wine, and purslane was one thread woven through it. But it was the thread that sent the science after this plant, and that is how a weed ended up in a medical journal. So let us take the science the way the studies actually read, not the way a supplement label would tell it. That 1992 Simopoulos paper was a composition study. It measured what is in the leaf. It found the omega-3. It found roughly 7 times the vitamin E of spinach. It found high vitamin C and glutathione. What it did not do, and never claimed to do, was put purslane in front of sick people and measure an outcome. It is a chemistry report, and it is honest to call it exactly that. Human trials have come since, and they are small. In a randomized crossover trial published in the Journal of Research and Medical Sciences in 2015, 48 adults with type 2 diabetes were given 10 grams a day of purslane seeds mixed into low-fat yogurt for 5 weeks, then switched to the yogurt alone. The researchers reported improvements in blood triglycerides, in blood pressure, and in body measurements, and they wrote, in plain words, that further study was needed to settle the right dose. Notice 2 things. That was 10 grams of seed weighed out, not a plate of the leaf. And 48 people over 5 weeks is a small, short study. A second trial, published in the Journal of Medicinal Food in 2016, was tighter, double-blind, and placebo-controlled, and it used a purslane extract in a capsule. On blood sugar control, it found nothing, a null result. That one matters more than the hopeful ones, and you deserve to hear it from me first. Pull the trials together and review across more than a dozen of them found that Purslane lowered triglycerides, lowered total cholesterol, lowered a marker of inflammation, and nudged good cholesterol up, but showed no meaningful effect on long-term blood sugar or on insulin resistance. Measured, modest, mixed. And every one of those trials used seeds or extracts in weighed doses. A handful of leaves in a salad is not a measured capsule, and nobody should pretend it is. The compound in the study and the compound in the leaf are the same chemistry. The dose is not the same thing at all. And one early note before we move on, because it circulates. A letter published in 1986 reported a trace of the marine form of omega-3, the EPA itself, actually present in the leaf. Later work could not confirm it. So set that one aside as unproven, and do not let anyone tell you this plant makes fish oil. It does not. Which brings us to the concession, and I am going to give it to you straight, including the part that does not flatter the story, because it will be sitting in your comments and you deserve it from me first. That plant omega-3, the alpha-linolenic acid, is not the finished article your body actually runs on. To use it, your body has to convert it into the long-chain forms, the ones the fish hands you already made, and that conversion is poor. The National Institutes of Health puts it plainly. Your body converts less than 15% of alpha-linolenic acid into those two long-chain forms. So 100 grams of Purslane, for all the omega-3 packed into it, delivers only a small fraction of the usable, ready-made omega-3 you would get from the salmon. That is the honest ceiling on the leaf, and it does not go away because the number in the leaf is impressive. Hold that. There is a second inconvenient fact, and this one is a safety fact, so I'm not going to rush it. Purslane is high in oxalate. The measured amount runs somewhere between 670 and nearly 900 milligrams in 100 grams of fresh leaves. For most people, eaten as a vegetable in a normal portion, that is not a problem. For a specific group of people, it is. In 2023, a case published in the journal BMC Nephrology described a 58-year-old woman who ate roughly 3/4 of a kilogram of Purslane stir-fry from her sister's garden in a single meal. Within days, she was vomiting, her kidneys were shutting down, and she was on dialysis before she recovered. That was one enormous meal in one sitting, not a normal serving, and she came through it. But if you have ever had calcium oxalate kidney stones, Purslane is a plant you cook rather than eat raw, and you keep the portion sensible. Boiling it, or eating it the way the Turks do, folded into yogurt, cuts the soluble oxalate substantially. That is very likely the quiet reason those old traditions pair it with dairy, whether the cooks ever knew the chemistry or not. And one more caution, drawn from the oldest records rather than a trial. Greek and Chinese tradition both used Purslane to bring on labor, and Chinese medicine still warns against it in pregnancy. Treat that as a reason for caution, not as a proven effect. So now we can answer the question in the title honestly. If this plant is that nutritious and half the world eats it, why does this country treat it as a weed to be killed? And the real answer is not the one the internet wants. Nobody outlawed Purslane. Nobody put out a warning against it. No company bought it up and buried it. What happened is smaller and in its own way stranger than a conspiracy. Here is the part that should stop you first. This was not always a weed on this continent. Native Americans ate it. European colonists grew it on purpose as a pot herb in their kitchen gardens. It had a seat at the table here. It was demoted, and it is worth understanding exactly how, because nobody demoted it on purpose. Purslane is one of the most successful weeds on the planet, and it earned that title fairly. A single plant can produce something on the order of 240,000 seeds. They are tiny, thousands to the gram, and they lie in the soil and stay alive for years. In a long-running buried seed experiment, Purslane seed was still sprouting after 40 years underground. Hold on to that number because it is the whole reason for what came next. The plant also runs two different kinds of photosynthesis. In good conditions, it uses the efficient system that corn and sugarcane use. Under drought and salt, it switches to the water hoarding system that desert plants use. And researchers mapping that switch in 2022 called it one of the very few plants known to run both at once. Now put those together. A plant that seeds by the 100,000, survives 40 years in the dirt, and grows straight through a drought that kills the crop around it. Think like a farmer, or like a seed company, in the country that was industrializing its agriculture. Why would you plant and sell a crop that already grows, uninvited and unkillable, in every field you own? You would not. There is no money in farming a plant that shows up for free. So as spinach and lettuce were bred and boxed and shipped and sold, purslane was quietly reclassified. Not by a law, by an accounting. It went into the weed control bulletins instead of the seed catalog. The entire agricultural literature of this country learned to write about how to kill it, not how to grow it. You would think somewhere along the line, somebody at the table would have said, "Wait, this one we can eat." Nobody did. And that is the answer, stated flat. It was not suppressed. It simply grew too easily to be worth selling, and it competed with the things that were worth selling. So for 100 years, we have spent our effort killing the most nutritious green in the field. The same toughness that makes it a weed is the exact reason it was never farmed. The plant defeated its own market. The strangest footnote is that somebody did try to change that. Artemis Simopoulos, the same researcher who first measured the omega-3, proposed back in the 1990s that purslane be brought into real cultivation as a crop. 30 years on, a review published this year noted plainly that in the United States, that adoption never materialized. The science was on the table. The market still said no. Though there is a twist coming, because the very traits that made it worthless to a 1950s seed company are the traits a warming, drying world now wants. A green that yields through drought and salt is exactly what plant scientists are chasing today, and so this old weed is quietly back under the microscope. So where does that leave you, standing over the plant in your own yard? You can buy the seed. So Right Seeds sells a packet for under $4. True Leaf Market sells the golden variety for about $3. You are buying, for pocket change, the seed of the plant your town pays to spray. Almost nobody grows it as a field crop here, though it is farmed commercially in parts of Mexico, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, and sold fresh in the markets there. In this country, you will already find it fresh in Mexican and Middle Eastern groceries, sold as a vegetable, right now, by the people who never stopped eating it. Or you can do what most of the world does, and simply harvest what is already growing. Every part above the root is food. The leaves, the stems, the flower buds, even the seeds. Raw in a salad, it is crisp and faintly lemony and a little slippery on the tongue. Cooked, it thickens a soup the way okra does. Pickled, it keeps for months. It is listed as a noxious or agricultural weed by states like Arizona, and it is not a federal noxious weed, so there is nothing stopping you pulling it or eating it. It is a cosmopolitan weed of no conservation concern. Nothing rare depends on it, no protected insect, no fragile habitat, so there is no ethical limit on how much you take. The only rule is where you take it from. Not the roadside, not a lawn that gets sprayed, not anywhere it has soaked up what people put down to kill it. A clean garden bed, your own ground, and you rinse it well. Which brings us back to where we started. The capsule in the bottle on your shelf, and the plant in the crack in your driveway. One of them you paid for, the other one you have been throwing away. Think about that contrast the next time you are at the checkout. A bag of spinach with a price on it, a fillet of salmon with a bigger one, and the green that beats the spinach for omega-3 and sent the scientists chasing the fish's own nutrient in the first place, growing for free in the lot outside the store. They are not the same thing, and I have been straight with you about that the whole way through. The fish oil is the finished form your body runs on. The leaf is the raw plant version, with a poor rate of conversion and a real oxalate limit attached to it. But the next time you are on your knees pulling this flat little red-stemmed weed out of the pavement, understand exactly what is in your hand. The richest omega-3 leaf ever measured. A vegetable that fed Crete and Mexico and the Australian interior for thousands of years, sitting in your fingers on its way to the bucket. Half the world would have washed it and eaten it for dinner. If this was worth your time, subscribe, because forgotten plants exactly like this one are the whole reason this channel exists. And if you want another one right now, YouTube thinks you are going to like the one on your screen. Go take a look.